What does this video have to do with Star Wars? Absolutely nothing, but Rise of Skywalker just came out, so Star Wars. Hi everyone, and welcome back to this behind the scenes look at Trapped. In this video I'll be looking at the post-production workflow and concluding the budget breakdown. So for post-production, the budget was for this 1 terabyte hard drive and 2 months of Adobe Creative Cloud for the editing in Premiere Pro and the media encoder to create proxies. The post-production took a lot longer than 2 months, but the editing part took about 2 months, so I'll just budget it for 2 months. I also used DaVinci Resolve for the color grading and Nuke for the paint work. Resolve is free, but I also have the full version because I have a Blackmagic camera, and Nuke is a hell of a lot more than free, but I have a non-commercial license, and seeing as I'm making absolutely no money off this production, I think I'm allowed to use it for this. The budget for pre-production was $457.24. The budget for production was $594.85. The budget for post-production was $178.87, bringing it to a grand total of $1,230.96, which is some money, but it's pretty cheap for a 8-minute short film. So pretty happy with that overall. So I edited in Premiere Pro and I shot Blackmagic Raw inside the camera, and this was at a time before Blackmagic Raw was compatible with Premiere, so I had to create offline media. I did that using Resolve actually, not Media Encoder. I exported DNxHR 4K for the timeline and H.264 proxies for them, so that was about 1028 by 540, I think, something like that. If you're not familiar with Premiere Pro's proxy system and you want to make films, I suggest you learn about it because it's really, really helpful. It takes a lot of the load off the computer when editing. Oh, one other interesting thing I did with this was for the high-res offline media, I left them as they were, but for the proxies, I graded them a little bit, mostly just applying a LUT and a couple of small correction things. And that was so when I'm editing, I'm looking at some nicer footage instead of the flat off-the-camera file. I'm looking at something decent, and this just helps me stay motivated. It helps me because I'm just looking at a nicer picture. And then when I want to grade to render temps, I can just turn the proxies off and I've got the flat image there. I can grade that and export that, and then when I go back to cutting, I just turn click the effects toggle in Premiere, and that will turn all the grades off, which is pretty handy actually. The only downside is that effects toggle also turns off other effects like flopping and cropping and transforms and push-ins sort of thing. So it has a downside there, but overall I found it a pretty interesting way to work. So yeah, the editing was done in Premiere. The credits were made using Premiere's new Essential Graphics, or reasonably new Essential Graphics panel, which I'm still learning how to use, but it was pretty good. Once I was finished editing, the color grade was done in Resolve, so I exported my timeline using a Final Cut Pro XML and imported that timeline into Resolve. It's useful to just check this worked I rendered a version from Premiere and I laid that over the top of my timeline in Resolve and set that the blend mode of that to difference, and then I just scrub through and you can easily see what isn't working. Things like flops and maybe Premiere Pro effects might not translate properly. Even just push-ins and repos aren't necessary. If they're keyframed, they might not be exactly the same, so you kind of have to go through and clean those up. But it's a pretty painless process. Once that's set up, then I was on to color grading. I did all the grading in Resolve, and there was some visual effects work as well, paint work. As mentioned in the other video, there were windsurfers that got into the frame in the beach scene, and I didn't want them in there, so there was a lot of work to paint them out. For this paint work I used Nuke. I'll show the workflow, but I can't show Nuke at the moment because Apple's latest update to Catalina dropped support for 32-bit applications, which Nuke is, so the Foundry is working on a fix right now to get Nuke working on Mac again. But I'll show just the theory in Natron, which looks pretty similar to Nuke anyway. So for most of the paint shots, the approach was to find a frame that would work as a clean frame, and then on that one frame paint out the kite using a clone brush, and then I would track that frame onto the shot as best I could, and then I would reveal that clean frame through a roto shape. So I'd roto out the kite as it goes along in shot, and then I would use that matte to reveal the clean frame over the top. And there was a couple of moments when the kites would go behind Yoshi, and so I'd just put Yoshi back over the top using a combination of roto shapes and luma keys. So pretty straightforward work, but just a lot of manual labor. There were also some shots where you could see the surfer going along on the wave, and for this I rotated them out and just translated the background or the wave over and revealed it through that matte. And that worked surprisingly well, and that was, I think, the method I used for all of those shots. Maybe a couple of frames of hand paint as needed. And the last shot in the sequence, there was some houses in the background and some people way off in the distance, but it was a locked off shot, so it was easy enough to just go through and paint them out by hand. And that was pretty much it for the paint work. There was one shot in the box at the very beginning when he's looking around, there's a reverse. I didn't actually build that wall, so that shot is looking the same way as every other shot. I took the light fitting off, but there's a hole behind it, so I just painted out that hole so that it looks like a new wall, and put the dog bowls in the corner where they should be, and I think it works pretty well. For music, I gave a final cut of the film to Will, and he went away and made the entire soundtrack for this thing, sent it back to me. I loved it. I put it into the mix. Paul Harling was doing the mix, and he recorded sound on set as well and did the sound design for me. And I think they both did an absolutely amazing job. And then I exported the sound into the grade and resolve, and I synced them up using a 2-pip, which I had. Super handy to have a 2-pip, highly recommend if you do this stuff, and rendered it out of resolve. And I think that's pretty much the post-production workflow for this film. Yeah, if you enjoyed this and want to see more, I will be making more, so stick around. Yeah, that's it. Cheers.